What will happen to Donald Trump if Lisa Cook sues over her unlawful removal from the Federal Reserve? Donald Trump has ignited yet another political firestorm, this time by unlawfully removing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook under baseless accusations of mortgage fraud. If Cook decides to sue, the case could open a legal Pandora's box, challenging Trump's abuse of power, threatening his financial empire, and even reshaping the independence of America's central bank. Will this lawsuit expose a deeper web of corruption, or will Trump once again slip through the cracks of accountability? The outcome could change the course of both politics and economics in the U.S. Stay tuned as we break it down right now. The removal of Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board by Donald Trump is not just a personnel change. It represents a direct assault on the independence of the Federal Reserve, one of the most vital institutions in the United States economy. Trump's decision, carried out through accusations of alleged mortgage fraud, has already sparked debate across political, legal, and financial circles. The question now is what will happen if Lisa Cook chooses to sue over her unlawful termination? The answer requires looking at the legal framework, the political implications, the financial consequences, and the broader message such a lawsuit would send to both Americans and the world. Lisa Cook is not just another bureaucrat. She is a highly accomplished economist with a PhD from Berkeley, a professor at Michigan State, and the first black woman to serve as a Federal Reserve governor. Her scholarship on innovation, barriers in finance, and economic growth made her a milestone appointee. She was nominated by President Biden, and her term was designed to last until 2038. This longevity is critical because it meant that Trump could not easily shift the balance of power within the Federal Reserve Board. By removing her, Trump attempted to create a majority of loyalists aligned with his economic preferences, particularly his demand for lower interest rates. The Federal Reserve itself exists to serve as an independent arbiter of monetary policy. Its responsibilities include setting interest rates, regulating the money supply, supervising banks, and acting as the lender of last resort. Its dual mandate is to balance inflation and unemployment. For decades, both Republican and Democratic administrations have respected its independence, even when they disagreed with its policy choices. That independence is now under unprecedented attack. At the heart of any lawsuit Lisa Cook may file lies the legal question of whether the president can lawfully remove a Federal Reserve governor. Trump has cited his authority under Article 2 of the Constitution and the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. He claims that cause exists based on a referral of supposed mortgage fraud. Yet the Supreme Court itself has already ruled that the Federal Reserve enjoys a unique form of independence. Governors cannot be removed for political reasons or fabricated allegations. They may only be removed under extraordinary circumstances, such as actual proven misconduct. Cook has not been convicted of any crime. There is no evidence that she committed fraud. The accusation is largely based on paperwork regarding primary residence declarations, which are common in mortgage transactions and rarely prosecuted as fraud unless clear intent to deceive can be proven. Even if there were an investigation, due process would require a trial or adjudication before removal. Trump bypassed that process entirely and declared her guilty by executive fiat. A lawsuit would likely begin in federal district court. Cook could argue that her termination violated the Federal Reserve Act and the principles of due process. A district judge could issue an injunction blocking Trump's removal, allowing her to remain in office while the case proceeds. From there, the case would move to appellate courts and eventually the Supreme Court. Given past rulings, there is a strong legal basis for courts to reinstate her and affirm that Trump cannot unilaterally reshape the Federal Reserve. Understanding Trump's motivations is crucial. His obsession with interest rates and monetary policy is not new. During his previous term, he frequently berated Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell for not cutting rates aggressively enough. Trump believes lower rates stimulate the economy in the short term, benefiting his electoral chances and helping his allies in real estate and finance. Targeting Lisa Cook serves multiple purposes. First, she is a Biden appointee whose long-term threatened to outlast Trump's political influence. Second, her identity as the first black woman on the Federal Reserve Board makes her removal symbolically charged, feeding into Trump's ongoing strategy of targeting high-profile minority leaders like Letitia James and Adam Schiff. Third, removing Cook gave Trump the opportunity to create a 4-3 majority of loyalists on the Board of Governors, effectively giving him control over monetary policy until at least 2028. This is not simply about one individual. It is about Trump seeking to bend the Federal Reserve to his will, undermining the very principle of institutional independence that underpins modern economies. The financial consequences of undermining the Federal Reserve are already visible. Markets reacted to the news of Cook's removal with volatility. Gold prices spiked, reflecting investor anxiety about inflation and currency stability. The dollar weakened as traders reassessed the reliability of U.S. economic governance. International observers compared the situation to Turkey, Argentina, and Zimbabwe, where populist strongmen undermined central banks to pursue idiosyncratic monetary policies. In each case, inflation soared, foreign investment fled, and economic crises deepened. For the United States, the implications are staggering. If Trump continues down this path, he risks destabilizing the global reserve currency. The dollar's dominance depends on trust in U.S. institutions. If the Federal Reserve is perceived as a political tool rather than an independent authority, international investors will look elsewhere. From the euro to the Chinese yuan to decentralized assets like gold or even cryptocurrencies. Domestically, interest rates could be slashed for political reasons rather than economic necessity. Such a move might provide short-term relief in borrowing costs, but it would inevitably fuel inflation, erode savings, and punish working Americans. The Federal Reserve's credibility, painstakingly built over more than a century, could evaporate overnight. Central to this story is Bill Pai, the Trump appointee heading the Federal Housing Finance Agency. He has become Trump's enforcer, weaponizing allegations of mortgage fraud against political opponents. From Letitia James to Adam Schiff to Lisa Cook, the pattern is clear. Accuse, defame, and attempt removal through public scandal rather than legal proof. Mortgage fraud is a convenient tool because it involves technical paperwork that most Americans do not fully understand. It can be easily manipulated into sounding criminal, even when the underlying facts are mundane. The accusations against Cook hinge on conflicting residency declarations, yet millions of homeowners have encountered similar technicalities, especially when moving between states or purchasing second homes. Turning this into grounds for dismissal is disingenuous at best and malicious at worst. If Cook sues, her legal team will highlight this weaponization of the mortgage system as part of a broader authoritarian strategy. Courts may not only reinstate her, but also issue opinions warning against the misuse of federal agencies for political vendettas. Democratic leaders have already sounded alarms. Congressman Seth Magaziner emphasized that the president lacks the legal authority to fire a Federal Reserve governor under these circumstances. Adam Schiff, himself a target of similar accusations, has publicly denounced the tactic as authoritarian. He notes that fabricating allegations is a hallmark of regimes seeking to silence critics rather than engage in legitimate governance. Republicans, particularly those aligned with Trump, have remained largely silent or supportive. By controlling the Senate, Trump expects to confirm loyalists to replace Cook and potentially others. This partisan divide ensures that Cook's lawsuit will not play out only in courtrooms, but also in the court of public opinion. The outcome of this dispute will signal whether American institutions can withstand pressure from an increasingly authoritarian executive or whether they will bend under partisan loyalty. Economists and historians warn that Trump's actions mirror those of populist leaders abroad. In Turkey, President Erdogan undermined the central bank to pursue artificially low interest rates. Inflation skyrocketed, the lira collapsed, and ordinary citizens suffered. In Argentina, political interference in monetary policy led to repeated debt crises. In Zimbabwe, central bank manipulation destroyed the currency altogether. The United States has long presented itself as the model of economic stability, anchored by the independence of the Federal Reserve. Trump's decision to fire Cook threatens that reputation. If foreign investors conclude that U.S. monetary policy is subject to presidential whim, the global economy will feel the consequences. The dollar's role as the world's safe haven asset could be permanently damaged. If Lisa Cook sues, the case will likely unfold in several stages. First, her lawyers will file in federal district court seeking injunctive relief to block her removal. The judge may issue a temporary restraining order or preliminary injunction, allowing her to remain on the board pending litigation. Second, the case will proceed through evidentiary hearings, where Cook's team will argue that Trump's stated cause is fabricated and politically motivated. Third, the case will be appealed regardless of outcome, moving to the appellate court and eventually to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's recent decisions, despite its conservative majority, have affirmed the principle that independent agencies cannot be dismantled by political interference. While the court has sometimes expanded presidential authority in other areas, it has recognized the unique status of the Federal Reserve. Therefore, Cook stands a strong chance of prevailing legally. If she wins, Trump will suffer a political and institutional defeat. His attempt to seize control of monetary policy will be publicly rejected, and the independence of the Federal Reserve will be reaffirmed. If she loses, however, the precedent would be catastrophic, granting presidents unchecked authority over the nation's central bank. This conflict is not only about economics. It is about whether the United States will remain a system of checks and balances or descend into a form of elected authoritarianism. The Federal Reserve was designed to be insulated from political pressure precisely because short-term political incentives often conflict with long-term economic stability. By removing Cook, Trump has demonstrated his willingness to override institutional independence for personal and political gain. A lawsuit would therefore serve not only as a legal battle, but also as a democratic stand. If Cook prevails, it would reaffirm that no president is above the law and that independent institutions remain a cornerstone of American governance. If she fails, it would signal that Trump's strategy of intimidation and institutional capture has succeeded, emboldening further attacks on other agencies and officials. What will happen to Donald Trump if Lisa Cook sues? Legally, he faces the likelihood of defeat, with courts recognizing the unlawful nature of her removal. Politically, he faces heightened scrutiny, reinforcing the narrative that he governs through intimidation and disregard for institutions. Economically, he risks destabilizing markets and undermining global trust in the dollar. Internationally, he invites comparisons to failed populist regimes, damaging America's credibility as the anchor of the global financial system. For Lisa Cook, the lawsuit would be more than personal vindication. It would be a defense of the Federal Reserve's independence, the stability of the U.S. economy, and the principles of American democracy. For Donald Trump, it would expose the dangers of authoritarian overreach and remind the world that even presidents are bound by law. The stakes could not be higher, and the outcome will shape not only the Federal Reserve, but the future of American governance. In conclusion, if Lisa Cook files suit against her unlawful removal, Donald Trump could face one of his most consequential legal and political battles yet. The courts will likely view this as an unconstitutional abuse of power, with implications not just for Trump, but for the independence of the Federal Reserve itself. This case may set a precedent on whether presidents can manipulate monetary policy for political gain. For investors, lawmakers, and ordinary Americans, the stakes are enormous. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for deeper analysis. See you next time.